Great, we got some folks from San Jose, it looks like, Chula Vista. Awesome. Palo Alto. Very cool. Really big crew today. This is awesome. All right, Carl, I think I'm going to pass it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to our second installment.
Trouble hearing you.
Shall I go ahead and start, Matt? Sorry, we're still seeing some folks trickle in here.
We might be having some issues hearing you here.
You might be in the Spanish room.
So Carl, if you hit the translation box, make sure you're hitting English and then try muting and then unmuting the original audio.
Matt, are you not hearing me? Matt, can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. Okay, folks. Hello to everyone, and welcome to our second installment in our series on building electrification, what we're calling BE 102. We want to thank you for coming to learn about this important subject, and we hope that you not only learn some new information today, but that it inspires you to help advocate for change in our communities. In our previous webinar,
we're having trouble hearing Carl in the English room.
Well, some of us can hear him. I'm not sure why.
I'm not able to hear you, Carl.
I can hear him.
I can hear him.
Okay.
I can hear him here in Oceanside.
Letty, do you hear people right now saying, I can hear him?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Am I in the wrong channel?
I think.
Maybe.
I can hear you,
No.
Letty. I'm not quite sure what's going on here.
No,
Okay,
it's
technical
a,
difficulties, folks.
This is Carl speaking in the English channel.
Okay,
related
yes.
to
I can hear you now.
getting natural gas out of homes and doing electrification, which is kind of where I,
like a YouTube video or
it's a Zoom meeting.
got it.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe we can just sort of get started. Just a question here is, if folks cannot hear Carl, please just put that in the chat box. And if everyone can, then great, we can just move forward. So if anyone cannot hear Carl Addinger, please let us know. And this message is being, or this recording is being, this webinar is being recorded, so it will be available after the fact.
Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us. So in BE 101 webinar, we covered a lot. And I don't want to go over all the individual things that we covered, but I do want to give you a web address here where you can write down that address and go watch that video. It's bit.ly/101BE, and we'll post that in the chat as well. It's a very informative video that was done by our friends in San Francisco, Melissa and Matt, and Linda from Mothers Out Front. So we appreciate all that work that folks did with that. Today we're going to cover gas usage and health effects, making homes healthier in our communities, and finally we'll talk about solutions to these problems, including building electrification. So let's take a few moments to introduce our presenters today, starting with Letty.
Thank you, Carl. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leticia Ayala. I go by Letty with Environmental Health Coalition, and we are celebrating National Healthy Homes Month. So a big shout out to everyone that works to make all of our homes healthier. And for those that may not be familiar with EHC, we are an environmental justice organization with deep roots in our communities, building grassroots campaigns to confront the unjust consequences of toxic pollution, discriminatory land use, and unsustainable energy policies. And it's through leader development, organizing, and advocacy that we improve the health of our children, families, neighborhoods, and the natural environment in the region. And I'm so excited to announce that we are turning 40 this year. We are a binational organization. These are the neighborhoods that we work with: Colonia Chilpancingo, Colonia Murua in Tijuana, the West Side National City, Barrio Logan, Logan Heights, Sherman Heights, and City Heights. And I just wanted to share with you some of the beautiful faces of some of our amazing community leaders working together to improve the quality of life in our EJ neighborhoods. And now I'm gonna pass it on to Matt.
Awesome. Thanks, Letty. Hey, everyone. My name is Matt Goff. I am a senior campaign representative with the Sierra Club, and I work on building electrification. I work both with city leaders and with community leaders in communities across California to advance building electrification policies. I'm really excited to see all of the folks who joined today. If you were a part of the Building Electrification 101 training, it's great to have you again. And if this is your first time joining us, I'm really glad you were able to make the time on this Thursday, and look forward to being able to share the information that we have with you today. I'm going to pass it back to Carl now.
Hey everybody, so my name is Carl Aldinger and I'm a conservation organizer with the Sierra Club here in San Diego. And I would also like to thank Lily Escalante from Environmental Health Coalition, who is providing the live interpreting in Spanish for us today. We're very grateful for your help today, Lily. So let's start off with the health effects. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the work of others who recently helped bring this important issue to light. We're talking about this today because of their efforts. In the spring of 2020, 2 new reports were released. They were both studies researching the health effects of gas in built spaces. Get out a pen or bring up the chat window so you can write down or cut and paste these URLs. The first report is a meta-study out of the UCLA Fielding School of Public Health. Dr. Yifeng Zhu was the principal investigator, working with Rachel Connolly, Dr. Yan Lin, Timothy Matthews, and Zeman Wang. They created this report for the Sierra Club. It's comprehensive, but it's also approachable. It looks at indoor and outdoor pollution in California caused by residential gas appliances, including furnaces, water heaters, and stoves. So thank you to the folks at UCLA, our teammates at Sierra Club, and the many others who helped with its creation. Experience tells me that if I showed you the URL first, you might have not heard what I just said. So here's the URL: bit.ly/UCLA_gas_health. That's bit.ly/UCLA_gas_health. The second one is a study about is also a study about gas and health, but this time the focus is on gas cooking. The study was principally authored by Ms. Brady Seals of the Rocky Mountain Institute and Andy Krasner of Physicians for Social Responsibility, and she's also a volunteer with Mothers Out Front. This report also includes contributions by Rachel Golden, Barbara Gottlieb, and Bruce Nalis. Again, thank you to RMI, Mothers Out Front, PSR, and the Sierra Club for your collaboration on this important report. I encourage all of you to bookmark these and read them through. They're both tangible. They provide tangible, shareable information. They're complete with citations, and many of those citations are hyperlinked right from the report. So now none of you have any excuse for saying something you've run out of things to read. Here's the URL: bit.ly/RMI_gas_health. So that's bit.ly/RMI_gas_health. Okay, let's get a better sense of what we're talking about here. I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. What percentage of households in California use at least one gas appliance? This includes furnaces, hot water heaters, dryers, stovetops, ovens. The answer is that 90% of California households have at least one gas appliance. Nearly 70% use gas stoves. Gas is the norm at this point, and that's a problem because of greenhouse gas emissions, but also, as these reports tell us, because of the emissions that affect our bodies. If you're like me, you probably remember being told by some slick public relations agency that gas is clean burning, like completely clean, no emissions to consider. That simply isn't true, and no one in the industry has ever understood that to be true. Mandatory gas venting for gas appliances has always been the norm and the law, but vents for stoves rely on us to manually operate them. Less than 35% of Californians turn on ventilation hoods when they operate their stoves. And in some cases, there is no hood present. So let's dive into the pollutants that are given off when we burn gas. Carbon monoxide is the one you've heard about. It's tasteless and odorless, increasing our danger to exposure. You should have at least one CO detector in every household. Acute health effects from extreme exposures are well understood, including nausea, dizziness, headaches, dementia, memory loss, seizures, brain damage, and even death. The more likely exposure we see in the household is chronic or daily constant exposure. Chronic exposure to carbon monoxide has been associated with brain and heart toxicity, heart failure, and cardiovascular disease, and also low birth weight when pregnant mothers are exposed. Now, it's important to note, I'm not saying that properly functioning appliances used correctly with operating hoods, properly venting to the outdoors, are having these effects on every person. But the science and the reports expose that these emissions in the home are a much bigger problem than previously understood. Nitrous oxides, including NO and NO2. Acute exposure effects include decreased lung function, asthma exacerbation, respiratory infection, and stroke. Chronic, again, that means long-term exposure, has been associated with premature mortality, lung and breast cancer, cough, shortness of breath, asthma, wheezing, and respiratory illness, especially in children. Again, I want to stress that these are the things the science is showing us can happen when people who are breathing excessive nitrous oxides, and specifically relating to improperly vented stoves in use in the home. Particulate matter is a leading cause of mortality and morbidity in the world. The term PM 2.5 is used to describe the very small particles that can hang in the air. Acute exposure to PM 2.5 can result in stroke and increased blood pressure. But chronic exposure can result in premature mortality, bronchitis, heart failure and cardiovascular disease, and low birth weight and preterm birth. Here's where I need to take a pause and mention that particulate matter can be associated both with the act of cooking and with the combustion of gas. So even with an electric stove, you need proper ventilation to evacuate it. PM from gas furnaces and water heaters is much higher than a stove, but they are more likely to have properly functioning ventilation that is used consistently. Formaldehyde, or CH2O, is the last pollutant that I'll mention. It's an important air pollution problem, but I should stress that with complete combustion and properly functioning appliances, its presence can be minimized. Formaldehyde in the household can come from a number of other sources, including from outside air, but the studies did include its risk to health, so I want to include it here. In the case of formaldehyde, the dose-response effects are nonlinear, so acute exposure may be significantly more dangerous. Formaldehyde's risks are many. Effects of acute exposure include respiratory, eye, and skin irritation, sneezing, coughing, nasal congestion, drowsiness, chest lightness, shortness of breath, and asthma exacerbation. Chronic effects of formaldehyde exposure include cancer, asthma and bronchitis in children, damage to respiratory system, headaches, sleep disorders, memory loss, birth defects, low birth weight, and even spontaneous abortion. I want to stress that the association with gas appliances and formaldehyde was the weakest of these toxins in one report. And in that report, they called for more investigation. However, the other report called out a specific risk found in long duration simmering situations, such as cooking beans for several hours on the stove several times a week, which Letty reminds me occurs frequently in our community. Now let's hear from Letty, who will describe in more detail why gas emissions in the home is a problem in our community.
Thank you, Carl. So here's a map of the toxic hazards in our communities. These are the neighborhoods where air pollution is the highest, and it is also where most of the people of color and low-income people live, where communities are fighting environmental racism. Zooming in, sir, next slide. You'll see that our communities have more than their fair share of industry permits, which allow them to discharge pollutants. The Air Agency does not consider how many permits they've already issued in a community before they give out additional ones. And for those of us in the environmental justice movement, it is no surprise to us to see that most of the COVID-19 cases in San Diego are also the same neighborhoods fighting for environmental justice. We know that the health impacts of cumulative and disproportionate levels of pollution in our communities have created underlying health conditions that contribute to the higher COVID-19 cases. And as you can see, our communities in the South Bay, particularly our Latino community, is suffering the most from the pandemic. A recent Harvard study also found that air pollution linked to higher COVID-19 deaths. Zooming in closer into neighborhoods like Barrio Logan, you will see the various sources of pollution, including the I-5, the 15, and the 94 freeways. Zooming in closer into the neighborhood of Old Town National City, you can see auto body shops next door to homes due to the mixed-use zoning. And while we may all have clear blue skies in beautiful San Diego, you can now see that we don't all have the clean, breathable air. And for those of us in the environmental justice movement, we painfully know how pollution, health, and systemic racism and police violence are all intertwined. We can't breathe. And so who is hit the hardest? Our children. As you can see, the air people breathe in Logan is not the same as the air in La Jolla. The most recent asthma data we have from the state of California shows the highest rates of kids' emergency room visits in the 92113 zip code. That's Logan. That's 3 times higher as the countywide rate. And as Carl mentioned, asthma is a chronic condition, meaning it continues over time. It might be well controlled at times, or it might sometimes get bad, but a person with asthma has a condition for life. Our children with asthma will have asthma for life. It's a serious problem in our neighborhoods. Another source of asthma in our neighborhoods comes from, quote unquote, clean natural gas. As Carl mentioned, don't be fooled by the name, as it's neither clean nor healthy. This is a chart which shows the highest PM 2.5 measurement of an air beam air monitoring sample on July 25th. It was when a clean gas was a bus stop along University Avenue near Van Dyke. The average PM 2.5 on this walk was about 12, but it went up to 23 when the bus was accelerating to leave the bus stop. An electric bus would not emit this particulate matter, and we are working on both the state and local levels to get transit buses electrified, starting with environmental justice communities. So clearly we can't breathe outdoors, but can we breathe inside our homes? And as you can see from this chart, our EJ communities are mostly renters. And as renters, we pay high rents in exchange for a habitable home, but in our neighborhoods, that's rarely the case. In our neighborhoods, we have absentee landlords, homes in deteriorated condition, poorly ventilated. Some windows are shut with old paint which can't be opened. Some don't even have window screens, so they can't let the fresh air inside. Many of our families are undocumented with low wages, having multiple families living in one unit in order to afford the high rents. Our families are living in smaller spaces, overcrowded with not much space to move around or to play. In our work with Healthy Home Visits, we a lot about housing conditions in our neighborhoods, as well as habits in our Latino communities, such as boiling the water to warm up our homes in the winter, not using the fans because they're too noisy even when they're available, and cooking beans for hours when, every other day, which means that the stove gets a lot of usage. We also notice that people do not open their windows, some because they don't work, others simply because they don't have a habit of opening their windows. And as part of our deep education visits, we go over the importance of good ventilation and all of the health issues that are associated with having poor ventilation. As part of we document the housing hazards and link families to resources such as HUD grants and or refer them to code enforcement. In this photo, you can see that the stove is not properly shutting and there is no vent. I can also recall a home that I visited in Logan Heights that was missing baseboards. The tenant was wondering if our program could install the baseboards to block off the pests from coming into the home. Then she took me to the stove to show me how the top part was broken and how she covered it with contact paper so that the rats would not enter through the top part. And then on top of this, I also noticed that the flames, the burners, they were more reddish than blue. So clearly there was a problem with the appliance. And as we talked about the ventilation, especially during cooking, she immediately opened up the window, but she showed me that the reason why she didn't open it was because it didn't open and close properly. And so on top of all of this, with the intent of bringing even more resources to our families, we frequently refer families to several of the weatherization crews in San Diego. They basically do numerous repairs, which are critical in making homes healthier. But at the same time, they are sealing up the home. And so as we're making homes more energy efficient, could we be trapping in the air pollution even more? And that's when I say to myself, ay caramba, we have such a problem. But I don't I want to end on a happy note. And as many as you may know, one of the big factors contributing to air pollution is the pollution from the dirty power plants. And that is why we're happy to announce our SOMA program, Solar on Multifamily Affordable Housing. And it's for residents that live in multifamily housing. So your building may qualify for free solar panels. So feel free to contact us for more information. And so just to end, the outdoor air in our EJ communities is literally killing us slowly. With so many sources of pollution coming at us and our air agency approving air permits left and right, it's making it even more urgent to ensure that the air our children are breathing inside their homes be as safe, clean, breathable, and healthy.
Environmental justice and building electrification.
So now I'll pass it on to Matt, which will cover more on how we can all get ourselves closer to gas-free homes. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Letty. Yeah, there are clearly a number of sources of pollution that are impacting our communities that need to be addressed. I want to spend a little bit of time right now talking about how building electrification can help to solve some of these problems. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the policy landscape, and then solutions both at the city level and the state level. And then I'm going to walk through some actions that folks can take to influence their local community, as well as changes that you can make in your daily life today to improve the indoor air quality of your home. So let's go to the next slide here. So I want to just reiterate some of what was said earlier. 90% of California buildings use gas right now. And this is because we have had policies for decades that has favored gas heating in homes. And this is because gas was originally seen as a clean, renewable form of energy. It was then seen as a transition fuel towards a renewable energy future. And even now, in some pockets, folks are still not aware of the harms that it poses, both in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, as well as from a health perspective. The good news here is that the tide is changing for the better. So we are seeing new rebates to lower the cost of electrification. We're seeing electrification pilot programs underway in California right now. There are changes to the state building code that are allowing for all electric new construction. And we're seeing utilities, the energy providers, create electrification friendly rates. So we're going to go into that in a little more detail. Next slide here. So there are a real number of policy opportunities in California to phase out gas in our buildings. So the first is just to make electrification more affordable. And there are a number of different ways to do that. So you could have new rebates to get modern all-electric appliances. For example, SMUD, the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, has a rebate program so that folks can get all-electric heat pumps in their homes. We need to be thinking about inclusive financing so that renters and homeowners alike aren't asked to bear the cost of purchasing a new appliance and instead having those appliances subsidized by government programs. And we need rate reform. So we need the utilities who are providing us our electricity to change the way in which they're charging folks for their electricity usage so that we are further incentivizing all electric appliances in our homes and buildings. The second thing we need to do is stop expanding the gas system. So California has some really ambitious climate goals. We are going to be 100% renewable by 2045. And in order to get there, we need to make changes to the city and state building codes to further incentivize new construction and retrofits that are all electric. The third opportunity is around housing. So everybody on this call knows that California is in the midst of a housing crisis right now. And we're looking at ways to house everybody who wants to live here in high quality homes at an affordable price. Building electrification is going to play a really important role in that solution. And there are a couple of key things that we need to keep in mind while we're designing housing policy and building electrification. So we can't have displacement. People can't be pushed out of their homes because of building electrification. We need rent protection, and we need to prioritize low-income renters so that building electrification is distributed equitably across the state and not just limited to wealthy coastal pockets of California. We need to plan for a managed and just transition off of gas. So this goes back to the earlier point that California is moving to a carbon-free future. We need to be thinking today about the future of 2045 and how we transition workers who are in the fossil fuel industry towards renewable energy jobs. We need to think about how we create high-paying jobs in these spaces so that folks can work with dignity. And as we're doing this transition, we need to ensure that there are protections for workers and low-income residents. And we need to be thinking about California's safety as well and climate resiliency in the face of climate change. And then the final policy opportunity is in health and safety. So California is notorious for having some of the nation's worst air quality. And it's true we've gotten better in the past couple of decades, but there is still a lot of work to be done. We know that emissions from appliances are actually affecting outdoor air quality as well as indoor air quality. And so building electrification can be a key part of cleaning up California's air, both indoors and outdoors. Let's go to the next slide. So one point here that I really want to hit on is that we need to be centering equity and justice in this work. So this slide is, actually the picture here is from the Equitable Building Electrification Report. done by our friends over at Greenlining. And they've examined what it would look like to transition California to an all-electric future that brings everybody along in an equitable way. And these are some of the key points from that report. So electrification must prioritize low-income housing and focus on health, resilience, improved housing, and lowering bills for folks. Number two, we need these solutions to come from the grassroots. And the way that we do that is partnering with affordable housing, community, and equity groups to advocate for things that they want and need, things like coordinated repair, renovation, and efficiency and electrification investments. As we're doing this work from an equity perspective, there are a couple things we need to avoid. And I hit on this on the other slide, but I think it's important to reiterate. So nobody can be displaced from their home because of building electrification. If we do that, we will just be perpetuating problems of inequity and inequality that have persisted in California for its entire history. We cannot have increased rents due to building electrification. So we need to make sure that the appliances that we're getting into people's homes are going to be lowering their monthly utility bill, not raising it. And we need to make sure that the new appliance installation is not increasing the rents for the folks who are living there. We need to make sure that we're also not locking communities into dangerous gas. So buildings that are built today are going to last on average between 50 and 100 years. And so if we have electrification in some pockets of California, but not others, we are going to have segmentation that is not permissible. So we need to make sure that this work is spread evenly across California and make sure that all new buildings are electric. Next slide. So city leadership has a major role to play in statewide policy. So in the last year, we have seen 28 cities and 2 counties adopt building electrification policies. The map here on the right shows where those policies have been passed. And so far, the concentration is in Northern California, but we're starting to see some real momentum in Southern California as well. City leadership is great because communities are able to craft policies that fit their needs explicitly. And they also are useful as a roadmap for regulatory agencies in California, as well as the legislature and the governor's office, so that we can get a more uniform standard. The ultimate hope is that the regulatory agencies and California leadership will look at what cities have done and create one policy for all of California that supports building electrification. Next slide. So in terms of policy options for cities, there are a number of them, and so I just want to hit on a high level what they are. So a number of cities have passed REACH codes. There are 2 types of REACH codes. One is all electric, and so it simply says that if you want to build a new building in our community, it must be built with all electric appliances. So this means heat pumps for space heating and water heating, and induction stoves for cooking, as well as electric washers and dryers. The other option is an electric preferred REACH code. And these kind of codes say that you can build with gas in a city, but if you want to do that, the gas appliances need to meet a higher energy efficiency standard. And that higher energy efficiency standard is more costly to do, and so it steers developers towards the all-electric pathway. Another option is a full gas ban. So this uses a city's police powers to say that gas in homes and buildings is dangerous and won't be allowed in new construction. The gas ban and an all-electric REACH code are very similar. The main difference is the legal justification. So an all-electric REACH code goes through the CEC, the California Energy Commission, for approval, whereas a gas ban is entirely within a city's purview and doesn't require any regulatory approval. Other options are for building electrification policy at the city level exist inside of climate action plans. So cities have climate goals, and when they update their climate action plans to get closer to those goals, it's a really great opportunity to include building electrification policy language. So that's another place to engage. When we're thinking about existing buildings, this is the biggest portion of both greenhouse gas emissions and indoor air quality for sure. And we're still cracking the nut on what those policy solutions look like. One really interesting idea is coming out of the East Coast. So emission standards for large existing buildings and having falling greenhouse gas caps on a yearly basis. So one year you could emit X, and then Y, and then Z, so it's falling. And ultimately, it'll make sense for a building to retrofit from gas to all electric because of those falling energy greenhouse gas emission requirements. And then the final space where cities can take action is to push the state to do more. So city councils, mayors, city staff, I think all have a really powerful voice and ability to influence regulatory agencies and the governor by showing all of the good work that they've done. So asking your city to reach out to the state once they've passed their ordinance is a really great way for them to continue to engage on the issue. Next slide. So all of this good news isn't without some bad. The gas industry is quite alarmed at all of the momentum and wins that we have seen in the last year. So if you look at the pie chart on the left, you can see that about 85% of the gas industry's profits are coming from buildings. And to drill into that a little bit further, a majority of those profits are coming from residential buildings because the markups are so high. And so as we electrify our residential building stock, we are taking big chunks out of the profits of the gas industry. And so they are responding aggressively. I think the quotes on the right side of the screen highlight that. We are seeing misinformation campaigns be run in places where electrification ordinances are happening. We're seeing lobbying with false information occur, and other tactics to try and delay and confuse these ordinances and prevent them from moving forward. The good news here is that we have the science on our side, we have the facts on our side, and we have the public will on our side. So we can still win, and we have been winning because of this landscape. But if you're wondering to yourself, like, why hasn't this been done everywhere already? It's mainly because there is a very focused opposition from the gas industry. It's something that we can overcome, we already have, and we will continue to. So it's something to think about as you're doing this work. Next slide. So how you can influence your city. There are a number of ways that you can make an impact. So education and lobbying goes a really long way. Building electrification is kind of a wonky subject. That's probably part of why you're here today, to learn more about it. Your average person isn't super familiar with the issue. And so just having a conversation with your city council member in person or over the phone can go a long way to get them up to speed and excited about this type of work. Another thing that you can do to influence your city is to expand the coalition of folks who are working on this. So if you're already in an organization that is prioritizing building electrification, that's great. One next step could be to reach out to other stakeholders in the community and try and get them engaged. So working with affordable housing groups or environmental justice groups or developers and builders, bringing all of those people into the tent makes our voice bigger and more effective. So expanding that coalition is key. Media is another effective tactic to influence your city. So writing letters to the editor or getting op-eds published is a great way to raise the profile of the issue. And finally, good old-fashioned grassroots advocacy. So if you're somebody who loves to go out and get petitions or organize a rally or do other tactics that you may have done on other campaigns, that is also applicable for building electrification and can go a long way to support these policies. Next slide. So some of what we've covered have been policy solutions to stop the problem from getting worse in the future. But I'm sure after this presentation, many of you are wondering, what can I do to make my home healthier today, right? Like, I have a gas stove now, I've got these gas appliances in my home, I didn't realize all these chemicals were being emitted from them. What can I do to lower my risk right now? So I've got a couple of suggestions for folks. So one is better ventilation. It was noted earlier that even though many folks have range hoods in their home, they're not using them. I know that they are annoying and they're kind of loud, but they can help to remove some of the particulate matter and pollution out of your home. So turning them on while you're cooking is a good idea. Opening your window and doors while you're cooking is also another good idea to help flush out some of those chemicals in your home. A second option is to get an induction cooktop. So that is what the appliance is in the top right of this screen. These induction cooktops have come a really long way in the last couple of years, and you can get a really high quality product on the internet right now for $60 or $70 that is going to heat your food faster and more precisely than a gas stove. and most importantly, is not going to be releasing harmful chemicals into your home. You can also buy air filters and put them in your house as a way to lower that particulate load and to get some of those chemicals out of your home. But ultimately, these tactics are tactics that mitigate. They don't remove the problem. Even if you are opening your doors and turning on your range stove or your range hood and running your air filters, you're still going to be exposed to these chemicals. So the best solution for when folks can make the switch is to retrofit your home and to go all electric. This isn't something that you can go out and do tomorrow, whereas the first three things are possible, today. You could order them all on the internet, but it is sort of the best case scenario when it comes to protecting your home and the health of folks who live in it. Next slide. So I'm just going to wrap up and say that there is a growing movement for gas-free homes. This slide illustrates a number of groups and organizations and people who are working on this issue. It's a big community, and we're always looking for more folks to come on board. So I'm incredibly excited that we have 77 people on the call right now to learn more about this issue and get engaged on the issue. So with that, we are going to open it up to questions, and I'm going to pass it back to Carl to moderate some of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So now is a great time for folks to open up the chat window. You should see it in your controls down the bottom of the Zoom screen. So open that chat window up and write us any questions, or you can also leave comments in there that we can discuss. But we'd like to find out what kind of questions this might have engaged for you. What are you thinking now that you've seen this presentation? What is it making you want to learn more about? I can't promise that we can answer all of your health questions because Letty, Matt, and I are not health professionals.
As soon as he got there.
But that is the point of those two reports, is to make sure that that information is detailed in a very careful way. So the first question that was asked a little bit earlier, I think was answered already, but we'll post it in the chat box again. It was, is there a video available for the BE 101 lecture or presentation? And so the answer is yes, there was. That's bit.ly/101BE. And actually, Melissa's on the call today, so thanks for joining us today, Melissa. And I have to say that was really eye-opening presentation. I also want to point out that both of the reports were presented sort of in press conference style. So there's a lot of good information out here about these reports. And it is pretty critical information, so I hope that all of you get a chance to read those. Next question we have is, how can we accelerate all electric new construction as the base code with gas-fired buildings only allowed in cities that pass a local lag code to not keep up with the state? Matt, do you want to try to field that question?
Sure. So I'm not quite sure what the commenter is referring to with the lag code, but I'll sort of give my general sort of 2 cents on how we can accelerate all electric new construction as the base code. So Title 24 is the rule that sort of is California's baseline for building standards. So all across the state, you have to meet Title 24 minimums in order to build anything. And then REACH codes, which we covered today, go on top of Title 24 as additional requirements. One of the pieces of the campaign, or the thinking here, is that all of the cities that have passed REACH codes that go further than Title 24 show state regulators that all electric construction makes a lot of sense. It is more cost effective than gas construction. It's a lot healthier than gas construction, and it's much better for the environment than gas construction. And so if we have all of these communities in California adopting REACH codes or gas bans, we think that the folks at the state level in California, the regulators, the governor, the legislatures, et cetera, could strengthen some of the base requirements or Title 24. So I think that gets at the question, but if more clarification is needed, go ahead and ask that in the chat box.
Thanks, Matt. So the next, shout out to Deanna, because she's helping us to moderate these questions by gluing stuff into a doc for me. So thank you, Deanna. In the past, electric appliances were unpopular because they were more expensive to operate. So how do costs with gas compare today?
Yeah, I can take that unless you want to handle it, Carl. Cool.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so this is a great question. Yeah, I mean, electric appliances from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, like, were pretty awful, right? Like, the coil friction stoves that I'm sure many people have cooked on were like, it was a bad experience for the food that you were preparing, and it was like costly from an energy use perspective. The good news is that the technology has come a really long way, like since the 1960s and 70s. So when you're thinking about electricity prices and gas prices here in California, it's true that on average, gas is cheaper per unit than electricity. But when you are looking at the efficiency of the appliances, those cost calculations change. So heat pump space heaters and water heaters are ultra efficient. They are 3 to 5 times more efficient than their gas counterparts. So even though gas is cheaper per unit in California than electricity, you're just using a lot less electricity than you are with a heat pump space heater or water heater. And then when it comes to the stoves, induction cooking and electric resistance heating are like dramatically different. Induction stoves allow you to heat your food a lot more quickly. They give you more precise temperature control and just really increases the cooking experience. There was some polling done that showed that after folks had experience cooking on induction stoves, there was higher than a 90% approval rating for that type of technology. So I think one of the challenges that we're facing in this work is that when people think of electric appliances, they think of appliances from 20 years ago that didn't have a great user experience. And the fact of the matter is we've come a long way since then. And I think a lot of people are going to be really happy with the performance that they can get out of a modern all-electric appliance.
Thanks, Matt. So next question is, how can my organization, Elders Climate Action, join the movement for gas-free homes? So I can try to answer that. So there are, as Matt was mentioning, there are ways that we're moving our cities to adopt these REACH codes, but it's a little wonky and it's kind of inside baseball. So what you might want to do is connect with your local Sierra Club group because we are doing this work in various cities. And so if your city is ready to, or your group is ready to take that on, we can help coach you and also hook you up with the group that's local to you so that you can get it started. Because a lot of times what the Sierra Club is relying on is some help from volunteers to help press this at the city level, taking it to city council and helping to push for those REACH codes.
Yeah, and I'll just add briefly to that. That is all 100% correct. And if you are working in an area where maybe there's not a Sierra Club chapter, you can just like reach out to us directly, and we've got a whole resource packet developed. So we can share that with you. It's got all of the materials that you'll need to read through to get up to speed on the issue, as well as some suggestions for tactics. So you can just go out there and start doing the work yourself. So like best case scenario is sort of like come into the tent and start collaborating with the Sierra Club and other organizations that are working on this issue. But if you're operating in an island, there are still digital resources available that will let you run with it on your own.
And I recommend the BE 101 presentation too, because we did go into some details in there about how Mothers Out Front and some other environmental groups helped to pass some gas bans. So there's some useful instructional stuff in that presentation. Okay, next question. Are there lists of companies that offer to work with homeowners to electrify their homes, or websites with specific products information for retrofitting?
I can take a stab at that. So, right now, as far as I know, there's not like a California-wide like database of all of the electrification like companies out there. But there are like a number of resources for getting the expertise that you need to retrofit your home. So if you actually go to like Home Depot or Lowe's, a lot of these stores are stocking all electric like heat pump space heaters and water heaters, as well as induction stoves right now. You might not know it unless you're looking for them because they look pretty similar to their gas counterparts. So a good place to start is just to go, I guess you probably wouldn't go into the store now, but go online and just explore what those options are. One of the places in the campaign that we're looking to develop is sort of marketplace development. So we want to get more contractors up to speed on these technologies so that they are actively advocating for it with their customers. So that is a little more of a sort of a patchwork across the state. Some places have sort of contractors who are more excited and informed, and other places there are less. And then another potential resource is your like municipal utility district. I believe in the South Bay in the Bay Area, there's actually like a 1-800 number that's being developed that folks can call and get their questions answered about what it would take to electrify their homes. So the short answer is like there is no like California-wide like electrification guide or like website. As far as I know, there could be, but as far as I know, I haven't seen it. But I think that's something that is actively being developed at the regional level, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something come from one of the regulatory agencies within the next year.
Yeah, and I'd like to add on too. It's this stuff is not really too difficult for standard installers of appliances. So these folks know if you call them and say, "I'd like to put in an induction stove, but I've got gas right now," they know how to work with local electrical contractors to get the drop in for 220 and get you up to speed. So if a contractor tells you that they can't make that switch, call another contractor because there are definitely people that know how to do this. It's not particularly hard, but you may have to press them a little bit to make sure that they understand you want to make the change. Next question is there a San Diego effort for an electrification reach code ordinance? So that's a great question. We have Richard on the meeting if he would like to unmute and answer, but I can start an answer, and that is that Carlsbad has already passed one reach code for heat pump water heaters in new development. So that's a great start. And I know that we're working on it in Escondido. And I believe there are efforts in Encinitas underway, but this is usually done at a city by city basis. So when the person asking the question asked about San Diego, they may be talking about the city of San Diego, but we actually have 18 different cities here in the county. So there's a lot of different cities that we can go and attack this problem one at a time, and hopefully get some of a ripple effect where cities start to recognize that other cities have already done it, and they start to understand this is a good way of meeting their climate action plan goals. Next question is, what specifically is involved if a city wants to adopt an ordinance for banning gas in new construction? Matt, do you want to try to take that?
Oops, sorry, I had trouble unmuting myself here. Yeah, I can take a stab at that. So what specifically is involved if a city wants to adopt an ordinance for banning gas in new construction? So I think that there is sort of a lot that goes into this question. One of the first places to start, though, is just educating the city council members about the issue. So one pathway, if you're starting from zero, is for you or your group to get up to speed on the issue yourself, so you can talk about its benefits. You can highlight examples in other communities and have responses for common questions and concerns that come up. You can then meet with some of your city council members and just talk to them about the issue. And then city council members can direct their staff people to start looking into what the ordinance would look like for their community specifically. So the REACH codes that have been passed across California, a lot of them, like, there's a similar theme throughout them, but there are sort of tweaks and differences in different codes that make sense for those specific communities. And city staff are often the best people who can help to identify what the specific city's needs are. So once you've gotten that process started and city staff are working on the language of the ordinance, it's a good idea to start widening your coalition so that you have a variety of groups advocating for these policies. And again, it's not an easy process, but it is a fairly straightforward process to bring more folks into your coalition, right? There are people who care about affordable housing, and building electrification can make housing more affordable. So those are groups that you can include. There are people who care about public health, and so building electrification improves indoor air quality, and so those people are interested. Builders and developers are interested in this work because it's a potential business opportunity for them. So I think that there's a lot of different ways in which you can engage. I think the first step is getting to a comfortable place with it yourself, starting to reach out to your city, and then widening your tent so that the whole community is asking for it.
Thanks, Matt. Next question is, what are some good sources of information for heat pumps or domestic water heating?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, I think a lot of the places like Home Depot and Lowe's, like, you would be surprised about the amount of information that they have on these technologies. So just do a little bit of digging on their websites. Some city governments have information on their city government pages about this. So San Jose, for example, has like a 2 or 3 page PDF that goes through some of the benefits of all electric cooking and induction cooking. And then we have some resources as well that we can share with folks. So if there are specific questions you have or information that you're looking for, definitely reach out to me and I can share that information with you. And then maybe finally, you can just sort of look on some of the manufacturer pages. So Mitsubishi, all of these different companies that make these appliances have information about them on their web pages, and that's a sort of a great place to go for that information.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. And I definitely learned a lot of this just doing Google searches. One thing that you'll note is that there are ways to compare various hot water heater sources or appliances. And you'll note that standard electric water heaters versus heat pump electric water heaters, the heat pump ones are 3.5 times more efficient. So that's the reason why we're really pushing those. You can imagine how much difference that'll make in the future if we are all going to move to electric. It's important that these appliances are as efficient as possible. And just, it's important to note too that even the heat pump ones are hybrids. So they include the electric element that you would see in the standard heat pump, but you can throw them into the high efficiency mode and stop it from using those except when maybe you have guests over for the holidays or something, you need a little bit of extra hot water.
One thing I just want to throw in, so we are at about 3:02 right now, so I do want to be respectful of people's time. There are some questions that have not been answered yet, but we have got these recorded in another document. So we will answer these questions and send them in the follow-up email for everybody who has joined the call today. So Carl, I guess I'll pass it over to you, and maybe Letty as well, if y'all have any final things you want to say. I'll just end by saying thank you everybody for joining. Really inspired to see all of the faces on the call and the questions today, and excited to working with you.
Go ahead, Letty.
Likewise, it's very inspiring. We're all in this together, and already made some friends via the chat. So thank you, and thank you, Lily, for the interpretation. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to second that. Thank you for Lily and Deanna and everybody who helped put this on. And please do go back and read those reports. Again, that's what inspired all of this. And I hope that you can learn from them and share that information with the folks that you know. and help get this information out. Thank you, everybody. One last thing for folks that are still on, we will be sending out a follow-up email. So if you need to get more information, you'll see contact there. Thank you.